Hola, estudiantes. Let's do a little review of mandatos, commands. Let's start with affirmative two commands. Affirmative two commands. So affirmative two commands, we're going to take the usted, él, ella form of the verb to form the affirmative two command. So for example, the verb dar would become da. The verb estudiar would become estudia. The verb pedir would become pide. Now let's talk about negative two commands. Negative two commands follow a completely different rule than affirmative two commands. Negative two commands, I start by going to the yo form of the present indicative. Then I drop off the o. Then I check to see if it's a car, gar, or zar verb. And if it is, I'll change the C to QU, I'll change the G to GU, or I'll change the Z to a C. And then I'll add the opposite vowel ending. So for example, if the verb ends in AR, I'll change the AR to an ES. And if the verb ends in an ER or an IR, I'll change the ending to AS. Let's do a couple verbs as examples. If it were the verb pedir, I would start with pido, then drop the O, pid. Is it kargarzar? Is pedir a kargarzar verb? Nope. So then I can go straight to step 3. Pedir is an IR verb. Opposite vowel would be AS. So the negative two command would be no pidas. Let's do one more verb. Let's do the verb empezar. So go to yo. The present indicative yo form of empezar is empiezo. Then I drop the O, empiez. Then I check if it's a car, gar, zar, and it is. It's a zar. So I'm going to change the Z to a C. And then I'm going to add the opposite vowel ending. And because it's an AR verb, the opposite vowel ending is ES. So I end up for my command with no empieces. Don't start. No empieces. So that's affirmative two commands and negative two commands. But what if it's an irregular? Well, these two types of commands have completely different rules for the irregulars. For affirmative two commands, the irregulars are ven, di, sal, as, ten, ve, pon, y se. So this is for the verb venir, decir, salir, hacer, tener, ir, poner, y ser. So this would be come, say, leave, do or make, have, go, put, and be. So those are the irregulars when it's an affirmative two command. But when it's a negative two command, the irregulars are totally different. You have to memorize them either in the acronym DISHES or by rhyming. No vayas, no vayas, no seas, no sepas, no des, no estés. So you probably won't see is and sepas very much in a command form, but here they are in case we need to use them later for another type of tense that also uses dishes. So dar, to give, no des, don't give. Ir, go, no vayas, don't go. Ser, be. no seas, don't be. Haber is the word that we use, like in the present tense, it's I, there is, or there are. So it would be no hayas, but you probably wouldn't command somebody to not there is or not there are. That doesn't really make sense. Estar, no estés, don't be. And remember, estar is for like feelings and locations. And then saber would be no sepas, but because saber means to know, you probably wouldn't command somebody to not know. But we might use it later. Now, that's two commands in both forms. Now let's talk about usted commands. Usted commands borrow the same rules. Go to yo, drop the o, check for cargars are, and add the opposite vowel. But since it's an usted, you can basically just use the rule from -2 commands, like this rule. But when you get to step 3, it won't be AR goes to ES, it'll just be AR goes to E. And ER and IR won't go to AS, they'll just go to A. So for example, the verb pedir here would still be pido, still be pid for step 2. It's not a cargarzar. And then when we get to step 3, the usted command would be pida. And the easy thing about this particular set is if I wanted to use ustedes commands, just add an N. So the ustedes command would be pidan. And empezar, the example that we used before, we would start with empiezo, step 2 empiez, step 2b, it's a cargarzar, so change the Z to a C, and your usted command ends up being empiece, and your ustedes command ends up being empiecen. And then lastly, nosotros commands still use go to yo, drop the o, check for cargarzar, add the opposite vowel. But now you're doing the nosotros form. So AR verbs will go to hemos, and ER and IR verbs will go to amos. And also boot verb rules still apply. And since nosotros is outside of the boot, if it's an AR or an ER stem changer, it won't stem change. So even though you're doing the go to yo, drop the o, add the opposite vowel, if it's an AR or an ER stem changer, it's outside of the boot, and so that won't apply. So for example, empezar, you end up with empiezo, right? In step 2, empiez, step 2b, empiez with a C, and you add your AR ending, empiecemos. Oh, but we're doing nosotros commands right now, so I don't make that stem change. So the nosotros command would just be empecemos. Now, if it's an IR stem changer, the boot rule does not apply to IR stem changers. Like pedir, go to yo, pido. Step 2, drop the o, pid. Step 2b doesn't apply. Step 3, IR verb goes to amos, pidamos. And I do keep the stem change because it's an IR stem changer verb. So AR and ER, the stem changer rule does not apply because they're boot verbs and we're doing nosotros commands. IR, we keep the stem change. Let's do a couple more verbs to practice nosotros commands. Comenzar. Go ahead and write down what the nosotros command would be. So we've got step 1, comienzo. Step 2, comienz. Step 2b, change the Z to a C. Step 3, add the opposite vowel, hemos. Oh, and it's an AR stem changer, so it's a boot verb, and I don't have to worry about stem changing it. Seguir, go to yo, sigo. Step 2, drop the o, sig. It's not a cargarzar, so step 2b doesn't apply. Opposite vowel of IR, sigamos. And it's an IR verb, so I keep the stem change. So AR and ER stem changers are boot verbs. You don't make the stem change. IR, you change them in all the forms. So I do keep the stem change, E to I. Let's do just a couple more regular verbs. How about the verb hablar? What would the nosotros commands be? Hablemos. How about the verb correr? What would the nosotros commands be? Corramos. All right, that was just a little review of all the commands we've learned. Hasta luego.